Today's topic is an episode from the Ramayana. Now, I'm planning to give a series of lectures on some of these ancient classics belonging to Vedantic tradition, classics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. Before entering the topic, I would like to say a few important points, a few remarks about the role of classics in the preservation of human civilization. There are different approaches, different definitions, and different interpretations as to what a classic means. And the word classic should be interpreted on a very broad basis, not necessarily a literary classic, a great classic painting, classical music, and also classical literature. In contrast to the non-classical tradition in literature, philosophy, music, and so on. One important characteristic of a classic is that it addresses certain human problems which are eternal. Its approach to some of the eternal values of human life transcends the limitations of contemporary cultures, contemporary times. They become relevant for all times, for all ages, and for all humanity. This is one distinct characteristic of a classic. Maybe in the context of literature, we would find if you read these classics, you are struck by the fact that they teach some fundamental, certain eternal values, principles, and ethical ideas which are relevant for all people, for all ages, and for all times. That's why we read Ramayana, Mahabharata, Gita, the Bible. Of course, this applies in religion, in philosophy, and also literature. Many of these books can be interpreted as literary classics and also philosophical classics and also religious classics. So they teach certain values which have preserved human civilization. Going further, it tells us where the human civilization makes its distinction from the animal kingdom. The members of the animal kingdom live in the present, and they address and they confront problems belonging to the present, the visible, the tangible, the empirical. They can't think of the beyond. They can't think of anything that transcends their own immediate surroundings and relevance. But human beings can think of the past and also of the future and also of the values and eternal principles which are relevant for the past, for the present, and also for the future. So this special characteristic of transcending the contemporary times and cultures and limitations is one distinct characteristic of a classic. If you read the Ramayana, Mahabharata, or an Iliad, or Virgis Aeneid, or Odyssey, or if you read the great philosophical writings of Plato and Aristotle, or Plotinus or Philo, if you read the philosophical works of Shankaracharya, if you watch the creation of the great masters of the Renaissance period, Da Vinci or Michelangelo, paintings, music, literary classics, religious classics, philosophical classics, they give us something which help us to preserve the human civilization. And they have influenced civilizations all over the world. All the ancient civilizations have produced these classics. Second aspect of a real classic is, I'm here mostly referring to literary classics, to which Ramayana belongs. Now, if you read a literary classic, you come across some characters in whom you can identify yourself. Sometimes you feel, well, I am not very different from this character. You will find your own face reflected on those characters. Whether you read Shakespeare, Hamlet, or whether if you read Dostoevsky's Ivan, the dry intellectual anarchist, or if you read Tolstoy's Alexander the Emperor, Russian Emperor, or Marshal Kutuzov, if you read any of these eternal classics, or if you read, as I said, if you look at, and try to analyze the character of Achilles in the Iliad, and you won't be very different. You find that he was not very different from some of the characters of the Ramayana. And you find in many of us some aspects of these great characters. But if you read a thriller, you won't like to identify yourself with any of those characters, unless you want a bad name for yourself. But if you read a classic, you find the conflicts at the emotional level, the emotional conflicts, the anxieties, the problems, the joy, and also the tragedies, all days associated with great classical characters. Sometimes you feel, well, I too have gone through these phases sometime in the past. So you identify your own friends and kinsmen in those characters. So that's why great classics are mirrors of human character. It's Hudson's definition. Great classics are mirrors. You find social life mirrored, reflected on those classics. And you find your own life mirrored, reflected on the characters of these great classical characters. That's why their relevance goes beyond geographical, cultural, linguistic, and ethnic boundaries and limitations. Now, Ramayana belongs to one of these great classical traditions. Two of the most important and the largest literary classics, they also are treated as religious classics in Indian tradition, are Ramayana and Mahabharata. I have referred to Mahabharata on a few occasions earlier. Its largest version contains more than 145,000 verses, and its modern version contains more than 100,000 verses. Supposed to be the largest literary classic, several times as big as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid put together. But Ramayana is much shorter. Ramayana contains 24,000 verses. But it comes very close to our own life because it deals with a character you call Rama. Essentially, he was portrayed as an ideal human being in the earliest version of this classic. Ramayana has got several versions. You may be surprised if I tell you that Ramayana had many versions, not only within India, in Nepal, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Bali, in so many other Far Eastern countries, Ramayana were translated with variations from time to time. But the earliest version, which roughly belongs to 2000 BC, around 2000 BC, contained 24,000 verses. And that book does not deal with Rama as a spiritual personality. He was spiritual in a very humanistic sense, but he is not treated as a superhuman celestial being in the earliest version of Ramayana, Valmiki's Ramayana. In fact, the beginning of this classic itself is revealing. The story is this. Once there was a dialogue between two sages. Narada was the teacher and Valmiki, the author of the earliest version of Ramayana, was the disciple. Valmiki puts a question to the great sage. Right now, who is the most ideal role model in this world? Who is the ideal man of this world? The verse is, Konvasmin sampradam loge gunavan kascha veeravan dharmaknyascha kritaknyascha satyavakyo dridhavrda. So here, this is the Sanskrit verse you find at the very beginning of Valmiki Ramayana. If you don't have the Sanskrit version, you can read the translation. Now, in this world, who is the ideal man? And then Valmiki gives a list of characteristics that he would like to find in this ideal human character. He should be an embodiment of Dharma. He should know the basic principles of virtuousness, righteousness, Dharma. And he should be grateful. He should be brave. He should be efficient. He should be intelligent. He should be endowed with a strong character. Like that, who is the ideal person whom we can look upon as a role model for humanity? The simple question was put to the great sage Narada by the author of this book, Ramayana. And in answer to this question, Narada replied, right now, there's a king, a prince, who belongs to the Solar dynasty. Ikshwaku Vamsha Prabhu Ramo Nama Janai Sudak. Means there is a king. I won't quote these verses again and again because my focus is on a different aspect, Dharma aspect. Its implication in modern times. So, in answer to this question, as to who is the role model in this world today, in answer to this, the sage said, a great prince with the name Rama, who is the embodiment of Dharma, righteousness and virtue. He is the role model for humanity. Now, the first and the most important characteristic of Rama is that he was the embodiment of Dharma. The word Dharma in the context of Ramayana means all the human characteristics that we normally admire and expect in a role model. But that's only one aspect. Its secondary aspect. Its primary aspect is, its primary characteristic is, Dharma is something that protects, sustains, preserves certain values and ethos in human culture, in human character and human civilization. That's why the word Dharma comes from a Sanskrit root, dhr, which means dharite, means that which preserves, sustains, protects, that guarantees the continued existence of certain eternal ethos and values. Now, if you have got certain fundamental, certain noble characteristics, which we all want, which we all admire in others, that helps us to preserve this world, preserve this culture. On the other hand, if there are people who are endowed with, unfortunately, with negative virtues, whom we call undesirable or evil characters. They have something in their character which threatens the sustenance, the preservation of human civilization. You can see, look at history. All the great scourges of humanity, those who have shed the blood of the innocent, those who have caused wars and massacres and assassinations, violence and hatred everywhere, they have threatened the preservation of human culture. They are called the scourges of humanity. You can start with one of the evil characters of Ramayana itself. It's called Ravana. We are going to deal with him. Or you can refer to Genghis Khan, Timur-Lane. You can find many such characters even in modern times, in Second World War, those who are involved in Second World War. Hitler, Mussolini, all that. We need not name modern characters. Of course, everyone knows. So, you find, on the one hand, certain noble human characters practice and demonstrate and live certain eternal values, principles of righteousness, moral ethos, which help humanity to preserve and sustain and continue and protect its civilization, its ethos. And the opposite type of people, the evil characters, they threaten, they violate the principles of preservation of human culture. So these are the two important aspects of Dharma, as I said. One, Dharma means all the admirable, desirable, moral and ethical values that we can conceive of: sincerity, integrity, truthfulness, honesty, all such values and virtues which are taught in all religious traditions. On the other hand, these great characters also represent certain value principles which help us to preserve human civilization. They are creative and constructive. They guarantee the continued existence of human life. Now, Ramayana portrays Rama as the very embodiment of Dharma. If Dharma can have a human form, that is Rama. So, remember, this certificate is not given by God in Ramayana. Even in fact, a demon, an evil character, out of total helplessness, gives this certificate of appreciation to Rama. Ramo vigrahavan dharmaha sadhu satya parakramaha. This is Valmiki's statement. And you know who says this? A demon. In fact, the uncle of the villain of Ramayana, who was Marija. Villain was Ravana, mind you. The one who abducted, the demon who abducted Sita is the villain, Ravana. And his uncle was another demon, evil character, monster. And this man, not a man of course, he was evil, monster, he in total helplessness is forced to acknowledge the moral superiority of Rama's character. He says, this Rama, who is my enemy, is the embodiment of Dharma. That was what Rama was. Why did he give such a impressive certificate to Rama? I can refer to two episodes. The one is most striking, so I shall refer to that first. At the end of Ramayana, most of you must have read the classics, so I won't tell the story from A to Z. It makes no sense. But I shall refer to an interesting episode that took place at the end of this episode, Ramayana story. Ravana was killed. He is the embodiment of all the undesirable, ignoble, evil characteristics that you can conceive of. The very antithesis, the opposite of Rama. So this monster was killed. And he had a younger brother whom he had exiled because his younger brother did not cooperate in his evil designs. So he excommunicated him sent him away from the kingdom. Kingdom is, Lanka, today's Ceylon or Sri Lanka, as it's called, which lies a few miles south of Indian subcontinent. So his younger brother though he was a bit upset, he was not willing to perform the after-death rites, ceremonials of his elder brother. Ravana was the very embodiment of evil, and the younger brother was a great devotee of God, was himself a great practitioner of righteousness. He was himself an embodiment of Dharma. He was a great devotee of Rama. In fact, he advised his elder brother, Ravana, against his evil designs. It is wrong to harm the women folk, the poor and the weak. You should desist from doing all these evil deeds. And for giving this advice, the younger brother, his name was Vibhishana, who was exiled, excommunicated from his kingdom, and he took refuge in Rama's feet. And after the war, the evil monster was killed. Then the younger brother, out of his sense of shame, refused to be associated with the performance of after-death ceremonies, which is something unthinkable, because in the ancient Indian tradition, the closest relative of the deceased should perform the after-death ritual. Then Rama gives an advice to Vibhishana, the younger brother. Maranantani vairani nirvurtam na prayojanam kriyadam asya samskaru mama pesha yathatava. This is Sanskrit quotation. We know. Normally my ideas follow Sanskrit verses. That's why I have to quote this. There's no. So the verse is this. Rama tells, look here, all hostilities, all animosities, all war, evil feelings, all come to an end when your enemy is dead. That's a literal translation. Now your elder brother was certainly an evil monster. He did all the diabolical things, all the sinful deeds. He was the very embodiment of evil. But now he is no more. You are his younger brother. So why don't you perform his after-death ceremonies? So Rama, who was the enemy of Ravana, who actually killed Ravana, of course, in this war, pursues his younger brother to perform the after-death ceremonies. Rama says, he is my brother as he was your brother. He looks upon the whole humanity as his brother, as his brothers and sisters. But since Ravana was an evildoer, it was wrong to allow him to continue his evil deeds. So to protect humanity from evil, Rama destroyed Ravana's evil kingdom. That's for the good of humanity, to protect the weak, to protect the women folk. But not out of hostility, not out of animosity, but as an act of preservation of the eternal Dharma, the spiritual and ethical values, which should be preserved for the preservation, for the protection of humanity. Then Vibhishana was forced to perform the after-death ceremonies. One example. So even when he was forced to fight with an evil person, Rama could fight without being hostile, without any feeling of hostility within his heart. That is the uniqueness of Rama. In fact, some of the episodes and incidents in Ramayana give us some other very important lessons that could be applied in real life, not necessarily related to religion or spirituality. Another episode I can just narrate. You may have heard of the story that this Sita was Rama's wife, She was herself an embodiment of all the virtues. That's how these characters are portrayed by the great author. So she was the embodiment of all superhuman virtues that are associated with humanity, all the great spiritual, ethical values. Now, Ravana wanted to kidnap her, abduct her. And, he had this uncle, I refer to Maricha. He was himself a monster, a fit man, a fit person to be an uncle of a character like Ravana. But even he was much better. He had some sense of duty, virtue, and dharma. So Maricha felt it was totally wrong to do such an evil thing as to abduct the wife of a great spiritual person like Rama, and she was herself an embodiment of all the great spiritual womanly virtues. So his uncle tried to pursue Ravana to avoid, to be a good man, to be a good ruler, to practice some ethical values and spiritual values, to desist from doing these evil things. But the monster won't listen to his uncle's advice. Then Maricha makes a statement. It's almost like a soliloquy. The verse is this: Sulabha purusha loke satatam priyavadinaha apriyasya pathyasya vakta soda sudurlabha. Now this has nothing to do with religion or spirituality. It has something to do with our everyday life. That is the uniqueness of this message. What this monster says is, it contains the essence of universal wisdom. That's the greatness of Ramayana. Sometimes in Ramayana you find members of the animal kingdom also talk like great philosophers. In fact, some of the characters in Ramayana who are bears and monkeys are much wiser than Aristotle or Socrates. You find a great character like Hanuman in the Hanuman's dialogue. He is portrayed as a great sage, a philosopher, a saint. Of course, he was not a monkey. There's a name given that way. Maybe some aboriginal race who lived in those days. But he was the very embodiment of spiritual wisdom and common sense, bravery, courage, a sense of duty, responsibility, and moral virtues. So here you find a person from whom we don't expect much of a spiritual wisdom gives a very sagely advice to his nephew, who was himself a monster. The meaning is this: Sulabha purusha loke satatam priyavadinaha. If you observe your friends and your associates and those whom you interact with every day, there are two types of people. There are those who tell you what you would like to hear, not necessarily what will be useful to you. So there are those who are eager to tell you what they think you would be very happy to listen to. They are not your friends. That's what this monster says. What a wonderful piece of wisdom, universal wisdom. See, there are plenty of people who are willing to tell us what they imagine, what they think will be pleased to hear. Because they want something from us. They want to please us. It's actually a kind of vocal bribery. And then there are innumerable people, plenty of people who want to hear something pleasant, though it may not be useful or helpful to them. If somebody could give us poison, but convince us it is nectar, it is something very wonderful, very healthy to drink, many people, gullible people, will be duped. So this man says this: This character says, in this world, both listeners of pleasantries, pleasant things, and speakers of pleasant words are plenty. But apriyasya pathyasya vakta srota sudurlabhaka. There are not many people who have the courage to tell you what will be useful to you, but you may not like to listen to. Because you may be courting the other person's hostility by telling him what he may not like to hear, but what will be useful to him. So pathya here means, if you are undergoing these alternate physicians, it means fine. Alternate Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, many of the ancient indigenous medical systems, the right type of food is as important as medicine. So you should eat the right type of food, and much more important, you should avoid its opposite. So if you are suffering from high diabetes, and if you are a glutton eating sweets every day, then and you like sweets, somebody would present you with a huge box full of jalebis, and that person knows that you like jalebis. That means you can quickly go to the other world. But they know that you like jalebis, so that person tells you eat plenty of jalebis. It's not different. It is priya, means pleasant. You'll be happy to hear the advice of such a so-called friend who tell you eat all these sweets. You are suffering from diabetes. But there may be some friends who would tell you don't eat this. They would advise you to avoid these sweet things. You may not like such friends. People who are gullible may not like such friends. Pathya means what is healthy, what is good. Apriya means unpleasant. It is good for us, but not very pleasant to hear. So this character says there are not many people in the world who have the courage to give a person an advice which may be unpleasant, but which may be useful to him or her. Listeners are few, very few, and speakers of these unpleasant truths, unpleasant but useful advices are very few. That is the advice given by this person. So, just few. You should remember Ramayana contains hundreds of characters, stories within stories, episodes within episodes, dialogues and soliloquies and monologues, and conversations between saints and philosophers. All you find in Ramayana. And many of the characters are not necessarily human beings. Sometimes characters emerge from the animal kingdom also, as I referred to earlier. So, some of these episodes are very, very relevant for all times. So, as I was trying to explain how Ramayana can be treated as a classic that teaches the essence of Dharma. Now, what is Dharma? As I already explained, Dharma, Rita and Satya. There are three fundamental values which are taught in these classics. I am going to give a brief description of these spiritual ideas. Now, as I said, Dharma could mean the essence of all desirable human virtues with a spiritual dimension. It could also mean the eternal spiritual truth, eternal spiritual value that preserves human civilization, society or nations. This is the practical aspect of one supreme truth. The other aspect of this supreme truth is the philosophical aspect. It's called Satya. Satya means truth. Truth is the philosophical dimension of the eternal truth. Dharma is the practical dimension of the eternal truth. Truth, as we call satyam, we call in Sanskrit the word is satya. Satya doesn't mean what is vocally or literally true. Satya here means the essence of all the philosophical dimension, the philosophical elements inherent in all ethical and moral principles which constitute dharma. There's a third value which is dealt with in these classics. The third value is rita. The term in Sanskrit is ritam. Now ritam means, again it's all related to dharma and satya, as I said earlier. These are the three dimensions of the same eternal truth used in with three different implications, but fundamentally referring to the same fact in essence. Rita is that coordinates, harmonizes, synthesizes the entire universal life. It is also the invisible cause and effect link, the sequence of events, the invisible thread or the link between work and its result, karma and its effect. Well, and Rita is interpreted in these classics as the invisible, eternal, harmonizing principle behind the entire cosmos. In human life, it works as the connecting link between karma and its result, work and its result. You can very easily see. We can never, normally we don't do anything without producing some result. Whether we do with an eye on the result or we do as an act of total unselfishness is different matter. But every act, not physical act alone, every thought, every idea, every emotion, thought current, all produce some effects in our character. It could take the form of an action or it may not take the form of action. But an idea or a thought current, even a flash of thought current cannot but produce some effect in our mind. So there is this cause-effect link relationship, work and its result and its consequence. This is one aspect of rhythm. And a person who is established in the principles of dharma will not do anything which violates this harmonizing principle. To give an example, if you violate nature by cutting all the trees through deforestation, what we are doing is we are upsetting the balance, the ecological balance. That may lead to the decrease of rainfall, famine, drought, and so on. If we go on mining the land beyond the limit, that also is a violation of the earth. If we pollute the air, that's again violation of the air. So anything in excess, anything which is inherently associated with selfishness or aggression or violence violates or upsets the inherent balance which preserves life in this world. This balance is called rhythm. And to live without violating this inherent principle of rhythm, we have to practice dharma. So dharma here includes all non-violence, harmony with nature, harmonious relationship with the rest of living beings, coordination, and preservation of certain ethical and moral values. All these are related to Dharma and Rhythm. And Satyam is truth. Truth as a philosophical doctrine is perceived as something that preserves life in this world. That's the meaning of truth. So a person who is established in truth will naturally be established in the principles of Dharma, and such a person will live in perfect harmony with nature, harmony with his own mind, and harmony with other fellow human beings. So far as Ramayana is concerned, Rama is portrayed as a spiritual ideal in human form, who is the embodiment of truthfulness, that is Satyam, Rhythm, the principle of harmony, and also as the embodiment of all human virtues in its most perfect form, that is called Dharma, embodiment of Dharma. In fact, one important reason why these classics are still read is that they remind us of our own duties with regard to preservation of Dharma. That's why, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and more than Mahabharata, Ramayana itself has influenced not only literary traditions, but also art, painting, different forms of folklore, not only in India, but in most parts of Asian continents. Because people who read this story suddenly become conscious of certain moral and spiritual obligations towards themselves, towards their family, and also towards the fellow human beings. The first instruction that is given to a student, that used to be given to students after the completion of the Vedic education in ancient India, was Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara. These are the two first fundamental instructions. Anybody who completes his education or her education would be given these instructions before they return to their respective homes. A kind of convocation address. You find the Yajurveda Samhita. The first instruction was, you should speak the truth. The second was, you should practice Dharma. As for truth, I will conclude within a few minutes, because it may not be proper for me to conclude this talk without referring to Rama's own act of preserving truth, his own commitment to the principle of truth. I deliberately avoided the story part of the classics, because most of you may be familiar, must have read it. But I shall just refer to that. At the very beginning of the Ramayana classic, you find the story is a royal family. The father, an old man, he had 3 wives, and Rama was the eldest son of the eldest wife, Kausalya. And it so happened that Rama's stepmother had received 2 boons from her husband, which he was forced to give in a very critical condition during the scene of warfare. And when the father and the whole population of the city were busy making preparations for Rama's crowning ceremony, Rama was the heir apparent and his father was getting old, so he had decided to make Rama the next king, the next ruler. And all were happy, including the stepmother. But the stepmother suddenly changed her mind. She was well disposed towards Rama, but because of the influence of a friend, she changed her mind, and she wanted her own son to be declared to be crowned as the heir apparent, and she wanted Rama to be banished in the forest. These were the two boons that she asked. And the king had to give. There was no alternative. And he was very much upset. In fact, he dies eventually out of the sorrow of this unfortunate event. Now, Rama was, for all practical purposes, not obliged to go to forests. His own father did not ask him actually. But when Rama found that his father had given a promise to his stepmother, and if he didn't go to forest, if he did not abdicate the kingdom in favor of his own younger brother, it would be violating, it will amount to violation of truth on the part of his helpless father. So Rama went to the forest. The interesting part of the episode is neither his father nor his brother, for whose sake the stepmother came forward and asked for these boons, opposed him. His own brother, the stepmother's son, Bharata, was a great friend and devoted to Rama. He wanted Rama to continue. He was very much upset. He even got angry with his own mother. Still Rama renounces the kingdom, the comforts, everything, and goes to the forests. So here, of course, I know that in a Western context, this is going a bit too far. But the point is, why should Rama go to forest just to keep the promise of his father, who gave this promise under certain peculiar, compelling circumstances? And his own father didn't ask him. Just because his father was facing a moral dilemma, Rama stepped forward, and volunteered to go to the forest to renounce his kingdom and comforts. Such stories are such lessons, though they may not have much, practically it may not have much value in our own times, but the moral principle will remind us again and again the importance of clinging fast to certain age-old values. So this one aspect. Another two, three comparisons, contrasts I would like to drive home, then I will conclude. I already referred to the incident where Rama himself came forward and told the deceased monster's younger brother that you should perform the after-death ceremonies of your elder brother. Now you come to Iliad. In Iliad you find a different picture. Achilles killed Hector. And you know what he did? Out of his anger and hostility, he tied Hector's body to the chariot and drove around the city of Troy in the presence of the innumerable wives and parents of Hector. In the Ramayana you find, after killing the evil character, Rama praises him. Rama pursues his younger brother. Now your brother is dead. Don't hate him. We should not continue this hostile feeling, this hostility after his death. You should perform his after-death ceremonies according to tradition. That's what Rama does. Something very interesting. And again you find another interesting characteristics. In Iliad, Helen was kidnapped by the Trojan prince, and the war is supposed to have waged for 10 years. After 10 years, Helen was brought back to Greece and she went. We had absolutely no complaint. But in Ramayana you find Sita lived for a short period in Lanka, and after that, but nobody could approach her. She was protected by, mythologically speaking, she was protected by her own powerful aura, virtue. Ravana, the evil monster, felt so much devotion to her. Still after that event, Rama wanted her to prove her greatness through the fire experiment, the fire test. And Ramayana extols Sita as the embodiment of all the womanly virtues like chastity, austerity, purity, and so on. So many people compare Iliad with Ramayana. In Iliad we have got Achilles, in Ramayana we have got Rama. Achilles, of course, kills Hector, the Trojan prince, and then cuts down his bodies into pieces and ties the chariot and goes around the city of Troy in the presence of his children, wives, and parents. In Ramayana, Rama tells Ravana's brother, don't hate him. Now he is dead, you should perform after the ceremonies. Of course, the two perspectives of Homer and Valmiki are preserved here. Valmiki wanted to project and present before us a spiritual person. How far a human being can become perfect by living this world, playing the role of a husband, a brother, a son, even as an enemy. You can be an enemy without hating. You can fight with your enemy without hating him. That's what Valmiki proves in Ramayana. Two perspectives from two civilizational angles. So anyway, in future we will take up this subject, different episodes from these classics, and we'll discuss. Thank you. Namaskar.